So we're on Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Beis in Seches Beitsa. We're just finishing up the last part of the Gemora on the previous Mishnah about when you're allowed to chop wood, when you're not allowed to chop wood. And we're now going to discuss the last part of the Mishnah, which says that if it's more of a professional implement, you can't use it to chop the wood. If it's a non-professional, for example, a butcher's knife, then it's considered to be mutter. Now the Gemora is going to discuss a case where it has aspects of both. What do we do? How, are you allowed to use an implement that has a bit of a professional aspect to it and a bit of an unprofessional aspect to it? How do we treat that kind of an implement? The gray area. Okay, so this is starting with the quote from the Gemora, from the Mishnah Lo Bakardun. Who would like to read the Gemora? Lo Amar Rav Chinana bar Shalmia.
Amar Rav Hillel bar Shalmia, Mishmei de Rav. Rav Hillel bar Shalmia said the name of Rav. Lo shanu ela benik nakvut. So, only talking about a case of a broadside.
What does it mean we're only talking?
That's where you're not allowed to use it.
But it says you're not allowed to use this kind of an implement. It means only on the side of it, which is called the nakvut side, the so to speak, feminine side. Well, let's finish the sentence and then we'll get to the Rashi on that.
On the shorter side, which is serrated, right?
I like your pshat, but we didn't really say that yet, but you might be right. In any event, we said it's the non-professional side. The side that doesn't look like a professional implement.
Mutter.
Then it's mutter to what?
To use it on Yom Tov.
To chop wood with it on Yom Tov, right? So we're talking about an implement that has two sides, and we're telling you that the Mishnah was only offering you to use the side that does look like a professional implement, and it will still permit you to use the other side, which does not resemble a professional implement, which the Gemora is going to say pshita, etc. We have to understand what he meant. But before we see that, let's just see Rashi's pshat in the nakvus and the zachrus. What are these things talking about? Let's see Rashi's pshat. You want to try it, Shabbatai?
I'll try if I can find it.
Well, do you know where we are in the Gemora?
Yes.
The Rashi is a tad above where we are in the Gemora. Very close to it, but not exactly parallel. Lo shanu. That's the first part of the sentence.
Oh, that's up there. Lo shanu ele benekavos v'shalom. We're not taught.
The Mishnah only was teaching us
that we're not to use the broadside of the knife.
Okay, and Rash says it means Rosh. Rosh.
The head. That the brow is broad.
Right, so it's a modifier of the word Rosh. So in English we say the modifier first.
The head is wide.
No, we say the modifier first.
The broad side of the head?
That's right. Now head doesn't mean what we in English we usually use the word head to refer to the head of a body, like a man's head or something. This is more like the end, as it were. Just like Rosh Hashanah really just means the beginning of the year. And then when you talk about something that has two ends, you talk about the Shnei Roshim. It has two ends, you call it Shnei Roshim.
So the board is.
So this has two ends, but I don't think it means like if you have a long handle, I don't think it means that on each end of the handle. It means at the end of the handle you have a double blade, and that blade is very wide on the one side, maybe the side they intend for everyone to use. And Rashi says that part is used what? Keep going.
Shekozin.
No, it's not a zayin, it's a tzadi in Rashi script.
Shekotzitzi.
Kotzitzin. Right? You know what the verb liktzotz means? Something, that's right, to cut, to like harvest. But it can also mean to cut, apparently, anything, cut down anything. So obviously the root, kates, which means the edge of something. It's like you cut something, you create a new edge. Okay, so anyhow, kotzitzin bo, why is it plural? Why is kotzitzin plural? Because he's saying, whenever you have a plural verb that's in the present tense, it tends to be what? Lomdim Gemora. How would you translate that?
They learn Gemora.
Either they or we, right? And in Hebrew, either one would be the plural, right? Because as opposed to the future and the past tense, where you'd have to pick a conjugation if you meant we or they, but in present tense, it's all the same. So very often, in a sentence where they're just describing something, it's like, this is how we do it. We do it this way, whatever. But it could be they, like the professional people, whatever. Either way, you should try to translate it along those lines. This is an implement. Shekotzitzin bo ha'etz.
Right, yeah. They cut it
With
wood.
it. No, with it. Bo means with it, right?
Yes.
A base can mean in or with. Like we say, bim and madlikin. With what do we light? Not in what do we light, with what do we light?
Shkotzim is what they cut, right?
Cut down, like to chop down.
Lerachavo, Didami.
Wait. L'rachva. Let's just stop there. We cut down a tree with it, with that end.
The broadside.
L'rachvo. What does that mean?
With a broadside.
Broadside of what?
With a knife.
No, but he already spoke about that. He's not going to repeat it again. He already said we're talking about the Rosh HaRachav, the broad end that we use to cut down a tree, L'rachbo. That would be redundant if he's still referring to the broad end of the thing. No, I don't think he's talking about the broad end of the thing anymore, because he's already mentioned that. Why would he mention it again? He's trying to give you a further explanation of the tree that's being chopped down, I believe. The tree gets cut down l'rachbo, on its width, right? In other words, theoretically, you could chop down a tree this way, its length. That'd be sort of from top to bottom. Or you could chop it down l'rachbo, its width, right? To chop down a tree across its width, that's how we normally chop down a tree, right? But there is a way you could have chosen, instead of chopping the entire tree down, you could start to cut down pieces of the tree lengthwise. Rashi's saying we're talking about something people use to chop down a tree widthwise, which means you cut across the tree, and that's how you topple a tree, right? You cut it entirely across the width and it falls down, right? You ever chop down a tree?
Never.
We should try it sometimes. A lot of fun.
You ever did it?
I believe I must have done it. I remember camping, so I must have done it when we camped. Sometimes there's enough wood that's already fallen. Sometimes it's all rotted, so you need to cut down a fresh tree. In any event, you understand what he's saying?
Yeah.
So I believe that's why he's saying that which end of the axe you're going to use to cut down a tree that you're cutting across the width of the tree. You need a large edge of that. You get a huge edge to be used to be effective, or else you have to be sit there, chopping away the entire day. But to really properly chop down a tree, you need a very large, wide blade. Right? I think that's what Rosh is saying.
So it's like the work of a worksman,
Yeah.
of a wood chopper.
Yeah, apparently that's called a professional. It's similar to a work of a professional. I guess those guys who chop down very large, big lumber trees, it's a professional thing. In any event, so when I learned the Mishnah, I didn't get that impression, because Rashi there talked about cutting, I think, leather. That's what we were learning. Rashi was talking about cutting down leather. But okay, Rashi's now talking about a different kind of implement, perhaps, that has two ends, a short end and a longer end. A wide end and a short end, so maybe that's the kind of implement that use the wide end to chop down trees, and that part of the implement is considered like an implement which is used for professional activity. And Rashi already made it clear in the Mishnah, it doesn't have to actually be professional, it just has to seem like it for the Morris Ayin to be a problem. So here I have an implement that one side of it is similar to a professional kli that people would use to chop down these huge trees. But there's another side to it. There's the Zachrush Shalom.
Yeah, the Zachrush Shalom, but on the narrow side.
That's what Rashi says, very good.
The Rosh HaKatzar,
Hakatzar.
on the narrow head, Shema Bakat.
That's the verb of our Mishnah. Mevakim.
To chop.
We chop.
We chop. Shemabakim bo eitzim mutar. It's allowed.
Yeah, well that's exactly what Rav is saying. Rashi just paraphrasing Rav. But Rashi's explained that this end of the axe, let's call it, right? The axe has two sides of the blade. One side is used for these huge trees, which is more like a professional activity. And the other side is much shorter. That's people use that to chop firewood, which is we're saying is not a professional activity per se. So that's what Rav is saying. Here you have an implement that has two aspects to it, so it's not exactly like the one of our Mishnah. So he's saying, but if you have one like that, the Mishnah would tell you that the side that is the non-professional side, the shorter side, you can use. And when the Mishnah says you can't use it, it means the more larger professional side of it. What he's calling the feminine side. Why it's called feminine and why the other side is called masculine, I was not sure why we choose, but it might just be in their day that's how they referred to it for whatever reason. I said at least there's a way of remembering that refer to it as a broadside. Okay, anyhow. So that Rashi now has explained Rav's Chiddush. Okay, so now we can go back to the Gemora, and the Gemora is going to have to deal with that statement of Rav and try to figure out what exactly is the Chiddush of his statement. So let's go back to the Gemora, try to keep one finger on the Rashi, so when we need to go back to the Rashi, and we can continue on in the Gemora, and by the way, now the Rashi and the Gemora are exactly parallel.
So, Pshita.
Mm-hmm.
It's obvious, but Koifetz, that it's Tanam. It's always if you're allowed to use a Koifetz on to go Wulam Yontif.
So since we learned that you're allowed to use a kofitz, it's pshita what Rav is saying. Why?
So Malav, what might you have thought?
Wait, no. I want to understand the pshita first. You're going into the answer why it's not pshita. Pshita means he shouldn't have had to tell me. I know it on my own.
Yeah.
Mahod the same is trying to explain, no, you wouldn't know it on your own. He needed to tell you because you might have made a mistake on your own. But I want to understand why the Gemora is saying it's pshita. Can you explain that to me?
Because the Koifetz is not a clean woman.
Rav said two things. Explain to me which part is pshita, or maybe the whole thing is pshita.
What's the first talk about a kardom, right? Means you're not allowed to use
The Mishnah says kardum. Mishnah says you're not allowed to use kardum. That's not Rav's Chiddush.
You're not allowed to use the broader side, only the shorter side.
And he's saying that's what the Mishnah meant. Lo shanu ella, he's giving us pshat in the Mishnah. That's what it means. Lo shanu ella means you should know the Mishnah only meant to talk about one thing, not everything.
So, okay, well, he allows you to use the shorter side of the kardom.
So Rav is saying the pshat in the Mishnah is what?
The broader side is also
That when the Mishnah says you can't use a kardum,
the broader side.
it only means lo shanu ella. It only means the larger side, which is a more professional implement, but the other side of the kardum, which is a shorter side, you can. So when I chop wood, am I chopping with a kardum?
With the shorter side of the kardom.
But I'm still chopping with a kardum.
Yes.
So that's really what Rav meant to tell me. The kardum has two aspects. And all the Mishnah says you can't use a kardum. Now, Rav was bothered. Because what do you mean you can't use a kardum? Kardum has two sides to it. I can't use either side? Is that what the Mishnah means? So Rav wanted to clarify. He said, no, don't make a mistake. Don't think that the Mishnah is forbidding you to use a kardum at all. I can use my kardum on Yom Tov. But Rav's being specific. Rav's saying the Mishnah, when it told you can't use the kardum, it means you can't use the professional side. Let's say the side that's more normally associated with a kardum, the thick side. When you go to a store and you want to buy the kardum, they show you the thick side. Oh, there's a really good kardum. Look how big the blade is, right? So that's what people normally associate with a kardum, even though there is another side to the blade that's shorter. Yeah. But that's what Rav wants me to know. That when the Mishnah said you can't use it, it means you can't use the side of the kardum that's the most commonly used side, the professionally used side, the bigger side, the what he's calling the feminine side. That's what's pshat in the Mishnah. And therefore the Mishnah did not really mean you can't use a kardum at all. Right?
Yes.
He's trying to explain to you what the Mishnah meant. And so now after Rav, I know I can still use a kardum, but when I use the kardum, I have to use the part that's the smaller, more insignificant side, that's more matim for chopping wood.
Sounds strange that they were given an alternative. Like you can't use a kardom, but you can use a kofetz. It's like, it sounds strange. So you say, you can't use a kardom.
What would you have preferred the Mishnah
But you
say?
can use a kofetz.
What would you have preferred the Mishnah say?
Let's say
just what it said. You would have written.
I mean, I would.
You are happy with what it says. You're not happy with what it says.
I'm happy with what it said.
You just said a minute ago it's strange that it said it.
Yeah, but I would have interpreted it differently.
Okay.
In other words,
I'm really confused.
Okay,
you like what the Mishnah is saying, or you don't? You said it was strange.
No, what the Mishnah says is good. It's just my way of interpreting it. I would have said that the Mishnah means you can't use a kardom, full stop. But you can use a kofetz.
Okay. So you don't agree with Rav's pshat in the Mishnah?
I'm having trouble with it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So what I'm trying to explain, maybe the way to understand Rav is, I mean, we understand why he's saying it, of course, but what I think he's trying to say is that when I go to a store to buy a kardum, the part that everyone associates with a kardum is the big side, right? It's, let's say lahavdil with a gun, right? Which side of a gun do you kill people with? The long narrow side that the bullet comes out of, right?
Right.
But you can turn it around and use the handle to smash the guy over the head with.
Yeah.
But when you go to a store and you say, I'd really like a nice gun that can kill people, which they say in Texas probably when they go to buy a gun or whatever, right?
How many do you want?
Right? They don't say, this one has a really good feature, has a handle that you can smash the guy over the head with, right?
Yeah, right.
Because when they talk about guns, they talk about the other side, the side that shoots the bullets. That's what most people mean when they... But everybody has to know that there's another feature of a gun. right? In a pinch, if you run out of bullets or something like that, you can turn it around and smash the guy over the head with it, okay?
Isn't it saying you can't use a gun, but you can use a bow and arrow?
No, the gun has two aspects. That's what Rav is now informing me. Okay, so the gun. So it said you can't use a gun. Okay, let's say, but you can use a hammer. Let's say it was being a mushal of a gun, like I'm using a mushal of a gun. Let's say the Mishnah would say you can't use a gun to kill, but you can use a hammer, right? And then Rav will come along and say, you know when it said you can't use a gun, it means you can't use the side that shoots bullets, but the other side that you can smash someone over the head with, which is like a hammer basically, you can use.
Yep.
But since it's not the normal thing to do, normally if you really want to smash someone over the head, you buy a proper hammer, right? So the Mishnah went ahead and told you the normal implement, right? Same thing over here, lahavdil. That since a normal kardum is used to chop down big trees, huge trees, you need a big lumberjack's axe for that, right? Huge head of an axe that after 3 chops the tree already falls down, right? You can't spend all day chopping the tree. So when it says in the Mishnah you can't use a kardum, that is the part that's normally associated with the kardum, that huge thick side, that huge big blade, that, right? And that's what the guy, when you go to the store and ask, can I see your kardum? They'll show you a whole bunch of those, right? And say, this one's really good because it has a big blade like this, and this one has a big blade. I'm not going to show you the other side. That happens to be true, that you can take the smaller side and chop wood with it. That's not why people buy it. But Rav said, but you should know, it happens to be a feature of it. It can be used to chop wood as well. The other side can be used to chop wood. So since it has double aspect, Rav wanted to clarify that when it says you can't use a kardum, of course it means the side that's normally associated with a kardum, the bigger side. But the part that nobody really talks about when they talk about a kardum, but it still exists. It's like the handle of a gun. It still exists. You should be aware that it can be used. That's all. That when it says in the Mishnah you can't use a kardum, doesn't mean kardum is completely off limits. If you want to use the side of the kardum, it's the smaller side. If you don't happen to have a proper axe for chopping wood, and all you have is your kardum around, and you want to chop the wood with the other end, that's still mutter. That's what Rav wanted to let us know.
So what should say?
So now the Gemora says, you're telling me I can use the side that's like a kofitz, basically. It's just a simple chopper.
It's a Chinana bar Rav, right?
Yeah. No, Chinana bar Shalmiya in the name of Rav. The Gemara is saying, why did he have to tell me that I'm allowed to use the side that's like a kofitz? Of course I'm allowed to use the side that's like a kofitz. It says in the Mishnah I'm allowed to use a kofitz. So if it says I'm allowed to use a kofitz, of course I can use the side of the kordom that's like a kofitz. Right?
Yeah.
So that's why the Gemara says what he said is pshita. Because kofitz tanan, it already says kofitz you can use. If I know I can use a kofitz, of course I can use the narrow side of the carpet. It's basically just another kind of kofitz. So the Gemara doesn't understand why Rav had to tell me that. It would seem that anybody could understand that if I'm allowed to use a kofitz, I'm allowed to use the small end of the kardum. So now the Gemara has to explain. No. If you were left up to your own resources, you might have said a wrong thing about that situation, about the kardum with its two sides. Okay, let's just see the Rashi on that kasha first.
What would you have thought if you were left to your own resources?
Well, we don't know yet because we haven't read the Gemora. The Gemora is going to tell us what we might have thought. Do you want me to let the secret out of the bag?
No, so that's
You just see it yesterday, but okay.
So that's a question.
That's what we're saying now, that it seems pshita. I don't know why Rav had to tell me something that I could have figured out on my own. And then the answer is going to be no. I know you think you could figure it out on your own, and maybe you could have, but there are also many people who would have made a mistake. And since many people might have made a mistake, how to interpret that case that Rav spoke about, he had to clarify how to look at it, how to properly look at it. So let's see the kasha of how Rashi explains the kasha. Pshita ela b'kofitz tanan.
Pshita ela b'kofitz tanan. Kofitz kulo zochis. Rashi, are you reading?
Yeah, that's good.
It's the whole short side. The whole kofitz is short. It's not broad.
Right.
It's never a broad side to it.
Right. Kofitz doesn't have two sides to it. It's all just that regular, non-professional side, that shorter side. So, since the Gemora said you can, the Mishnah says you can use a kofitz, and kofitz is zachrus, right? That however we define the zachrus thing, the Rashi before explained it. If a kofitz is zachrus, then of course, if I can use a kofitz, which is zachrus, I can use the side of the cardam, which is zachrus. Because it's basically saying I could use a kofitz. So that's why the Gemora felt it's pshita. The Rav didn't have to tell me that I'm allowed to use that side, because that side is zachrus, and kofitz is zachrus, and I already know I can use a kofitz, so I already know I can use a zachrus. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're ready for the answer of the Gemora, on which there is no Rashi, by the way. The next Rashi is going to be on the Ika Damasnela, on the other version. So let's wait.
So, what would you have thought that, Rav?
This is the answer. Why Rav had to tell me the real pshat, because without Rav, Mahu Desema, what might you have said, and you would have made a mistake by saying so, by the way.
And then really these words apply.
What does that mean, these words? When it says you can't use a kardum, that means these words apply, meaning the isser to use the kardum applies.
Kofitz lechudei.
Oh no, so it's not talking about the kardum now.
It's
It's talking about the kasha. The kasha was, we already learned that kofitz is mutter. He's saying, when would I have thought that kofitz is mutter? Mahani Mila, when would it have been that only kofitz lechudei? If I had just been left up to my own devices and I looked at the Mishnah, I see kofitz is mutter, I would have thought maybe that means a kofitz is mutter when there's only a kofitz on an implement. When an implement has only a kofitz to it, then you can use it. Aval,
Kardum v'kofitz.
if you have a double implement, that's both kardum on one side and kofitz on the other,
Ema migoi.
then I might have said a mistake that migo, that since
The Hagisa also, the broader side is also,
right,
Hagisa Nami also. I think the shorter side will also be also.
right. We would think that it all gets lumped into one, and we said yesterday a bit of a svara to that, right? Why would you think to lump it all together? Because if the whole problem is Maris Ayin, it doesn't help that I use one side versus the other. People still see me using this implement and might think I actually am using the wrong side. Kamash Malan, we're not worried about that. And yesterday I explained Kamash Malan meant that since the whole problem is Maris Ayin, to be worried that people are going to think I use the broad side. When I use the narrow side, that's already one supposition, that people are going to make that mistake about what I did. And then they're going to make one more mistake, that if I use the broad side, maybe I'm doing malach in the back. That's called a chashash rachok. That's called a very remote worry. I'm worried about something remotely, vaguely possible. Right? Once something's like, maybe this will happen, and then maybe this will happen, it's like, how many maybes are you going to throw into you're going to lead your life, everything maybe, maybe, maybe. I can't walk out of the house, because maybe there's a lion there. You ever read the Mishnah, the Mesilas Yesharim? Mesilas Yesharim says some people are so lazy, they create these weird scenarios in their mind. Right? Like these people who stay in bed all day. Some of them stay in bed all day because they're afraid. If I get out of bed, I might hit my head on the wall. And then if I hit my head on the wall, I might fall on the floor. And then if I fall on the floor, I might have a heart attack.
Too many cheshbonos.
Right? So there are people who maybe do that, but that's like a weird, like basically sick person. Right? People stay in bed all day. Right? Who
You're
have
in the
big,
charger?
serious problems.
You
Huh?
know his charger? That's what
It's fine.
Yeah, too many cheshbonos.
So that's called a chashash rachok. If I'm worried that someone might see me and think I'm doing a malacha, okay, that's like one chashash, one mistake someone might make. That's possible, you know, people do that sometimes.
Why have they charge it here? Do you need to charge yours as well?
That's true. Alright, anyhow, so that's what we have to realize. The first chashash, you know, it's being a bit paranoid, right? Maybe someone's going to see me using this. I'm using the cardum to chop wood. That's what my real desire is on Yom Tov, right? I'm not going to be chopping down trees, right? But what are we worried, Rashi said in the Mishnah? If someone sees me with the cardum, using the cardum, they'll think maybe I'm in the back, right, we're behind the scenes using it for malacha, chopping down trees or whatever, right? So that's called a chashash, right? But is that likely to happen? Not likely, but it's possible, right? So for that possibility, Chazal can step in, right? They're like the nervous mother. It might happen. You might get pneumonia if you don't wear a coat in the rain, right? So they get very upset. That's why the Chazal are like our avos. We call them Pirkei Avos, right? They're a little bit like our parents. You get all paranoid. They don't want us to take, improper chances. So that's I understand what Chazal say. You know what? Someone might think that it's possible, so don't do it, right? Better steer clear of something where people could think you're doing the wrong thing, okay? But to say, somebody will see me using a cardum, but I'm not using the cardum, I'm using the other side that's like the kofitz. But they might think I'm using the large side. And what happens if they see me think I'm using the large side? They might make another mistake and think I'm using it in the back of the house to chop down trees. So that's called a chashash rachok, right? Chazal are very, right? They have a balancing act. They are afraid for us. They do want to make sure we don't do things that could lead to someone else making a mistake, or even sometimes we ourselves might make a mistake. So they look out for us. They look out for Klal Yisrael. But they have to balance it out. They can't just be worried about every chashash rachok, right? Every time, well, this might lead to this and this might lead to that. If it's too far removed, that's called a chashash rachok. Okay? So I think that's what the Kamash Malan is in this case. Because the whole problem in the first place of using the kofitz, and I'm not using the kofitz for something that's asr, I'm using it for something that's mutter, but people might think I'm using it for something that's asr. Okay. Now I'm not even using the cardum, I'm using the kofitz, which is entirely mutter, but people might think if I'm using the kofitz, they might think the cardum, they see me think I'm using the cardum, they might think I'm doing something worse. That's too many steps. Too many steps is called a chashash rachok. Sorry?
What is the actual word ka mashma mean?
We know ka is just in fact. Mashma is understood, lan to us. But I think it has a slightly different meaning in terms of like mashma, I think, is being used in the sense of mashmiya. Mashmiya means to cause us to hear, right? Like the word shomea means to hear, mashmiya means to make someone hear. To cause us to hear. So when you write a Mishnah, or here it's Rav Hillel bar Shilmiya, whatever, and the name of Rav, he wanted to cause us to hear a Chiddush, right? The Gemora even said, you don't need to tell me that, I can figure that out on my own, Pshita. So he says, no, you wouldn't be able to figure this out on your own, you might make a big mistake. Therefore, it had to come teach us not to say that. So, mashma is in the sense of mashmiya, I think, in this context. He had to come teach us to let us hear not to say that, not to make this mistake.
So it's always telling you something it's not going to be.
Well, again, I might have thought, A, he had to come teach me, B, to make sure I don't think A. But it's all a possibility. I might have made a mistake. Therefore, in order to make sure I don't make that mistake, he had to come tell me in very explicit terms the real pshat. What that means practically is that I might have thought to say the wrong pshat. He came to tell me the right pshat, that I shouldn't come to teach the wrong pshat. So it has the effect of saying, I might have thought A, kamash malan, A is wrong, and it's really B. So in this case, if we fit it back into the Gemora we had before, the Gemora said, we already know that kofis is mutter. So he said, no, but you might have thought when it says kofitz is mutter, that's only when it's a kofitz by itself, an implement that has only one side to it, a kofitz side. But if you have an implement that has two sides, then maybe you can't use that because, again, people might think you're using the wrong side. So, kamash malan, that no, when it says in the Mishnah you can't use a kardum, but you can use a kofitz, it means you can't use a kardum, means the side that's a kardum. And you can do the kofitz, meaning no matter what. If the kofitz is by itself, or if it's part of a larger implement, you can use the kofitz side.
So there's two things going to teach us. We're going to use the shoulder side of with the double implement.
That's one thing.
And you got to use the kofit side.
So what? Kofitz side? That's
So
what you just said. If it has two sides, you can use the kofitz side. What are the two things you're saying? I only hear one thing.
No, I made a mistake. So it's only one side is...
If it has only a kofitz, that was already handled in the Mishnah. That was the Gemora said. I already know that an implement that has only a kofitz side is mutter, and that's what, according to Rav Hillel, I might have thought that's all this mutter, just when the kofitz is by itself. But if you have an implement that has a kofitz side and a kardum side, I wouldn't be able to use the kofitz side even. That's what I might have thought. But kamash malan Rav Hillel that no, you can use a kofitz no matter what, even if it happens to be part of the implement that's the kardum.
Das ist Shalmi bar Shalmi, right?
Rav Chinana bar Shalmia in the name of Rav.
So kofit part of the cardum will always be the narrow side, the zachar.
According to Rashi, obviously, if you go to Russia and they make some kind of weird implement, you could get some other thing. I don't know. We're only talking about those implements they made in their day, but I'm sure you could find some weird implement that's made in Siberia or something that would have slightly different dimensions, and then you have to use the principle that's involved here. The principle is if it's an implement that has professional usage, I'm not allowed to use it. If it's an implement that doesn't have professional usage, I'm allowed to use it. And now we're saying, but what if it has two sides to it, a professional side and a non-professional side? How do I look at it now? So I'm for sure not allowed to use the professional side. But Rav Hillel wanted me to know, but I'm still allowed to use the non-professional side. Whatever the dimensions will be. If that's the principle that we're learning, then it could apply to any implement no matter what. Okay. So now we're ready for the Ika Damasni law. And now there will be a Rashi on this, so let's just keep two fingers planted, one in the Gemora, one in Rashi. In the Gemora, the Ika Damasni law is a little bit below, again, where the Rashi is. So if you know where it is in the Gemora, look slightly up to find the Rashi, although it is a longer Rashi. So it will actually span and eventually reach where we are in the Gemora as well. Okay, who would like to try the Ika Damasni law?
Me?
Go for it.
Ika Damasni law is safer than the Bukhovitz. And those who learn in the Mishnah
No,
safer.
they learn it. Masni law, they learn it. You know what they're learning? Look at Rashi. Shabbatai, you have it, the Ika Damasni law.
I have Ika Damasni law, but it doesn't say Sefer. It says
Excuse me? What doesn't it say?
Sefer. Oh, well, it does, eventually. Okay, the Rabbi...
This is Rashi's modus operandi. He always quotes a few words from the Gemara, interpolates a few words, and then more words from the Gemara. It's like a running commentary, what they call it.
So he's talking about the last part of the Mishnah, right?
The Gemara quotes Elavakofitz. That's the part we're talking about now.
Right.
But what does it mean? There are those that learn it on the Seifa. They learn it onto the Seifa. That means the Seifa is the Elavakofitz. They learn something onto that. What do they learn onto it? Let's see, Rashi. They learn what? Ika Damasni law. Some people learn it. What do they learn? You have it, Shabbatai?
Need to help you?
Put in my Rashi clause as well.
Yeah, and you're thinking cap. You're
That
wearing it.
I
You are
left
wearing
in
it.
bed this morning.
No, I see it's you're wearing it.
I see the Ika
Some people
Damasni.
call it a yidlid.
La de Rabbi Chanin.
Liha.
Oh, Laha, I got it.
Okay, good.
Okay, Rav.
Just a run on Rashi.
Right.
Some people, Ika means there are those, Damasni law, that learn it. They learn what? Ha de Rav Chinana. They learn the what? Statement of Rav Chinana. So remember, what was the statement of Rav Chinana? Rav Chinana came along to say, don't think it's talking about a general case, it's talking about a specific case, right? In the previous section we said, Rav Chinana was telling us when it says kardom is usser, it doesn't mean both sides of the kardom, it means only one side of the kardom. So here he's making the same kind of a statement, but not in the kardom section of the Mishnah, but rather on the seifa part, which talks about a kofitz. But he's still coming along to say, don't think that the Mishnah is talking in general, it's talking specific. Okay? So, Rav Chinana, some people learn this statement of Rav Chinana, this lo shanu ela thing, they learn it where?
The Sefer.
Seifa, onto the Seifa of the
Of our Mishnah.
Nisnisin, of our Mishnah. Okay, now that means it's going to apply to what? It's going to apply to the kofitz. He spoke about a kofitz. In the previous section he spoke about a kardum, how to look at the kardum section of the Mishnah. He clarified how to look at that section. Here he's not talking about the kardum section directly, he's talking about the kofitz section. Okay, and what's he saying? Don't think about it. In one respect, we have to think about it in a different respect, right? He's coming along to tell us how to read the heter of kofitz, right? Now, Rashi adds a bit of extra explanation here. Let's continue on in Rashi. Maybe it will only make sense when we see the rest of the Gemora, but let's try right now to see the rest of this Rashi. Are you with me, Shabbatai?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Good. Are you up for the task?
Well,
You know where we are in the Rashi?
Yes. Uba Atira.
Atre.
Atre.
What's atre? Like we call the rabbi the Mara de Atra. You know what an Atra is? What is the Mora? You know what a Mora is?
Teacher.
Master.
Or master.
Like Mar. Mar is master, Mr. Master. Right? So Mara de Atra, what do we call the rabbi, the Mara de Atra? He's the master of what?
Place.
This place. Good.
What's the place?
That's what an Atra is in Aramaic, right? It's Aramaic word.
How did you know this? Right?
I heard of your road before.
He's a trove of knowledge. Sitting right across you. I mean, you won't
Well,
lose it.
Rebbe
Right
said it
across you.
before.
Almost right across you. What?
Like we said it before in the Rebbe show.
That's true. That's
Where?
true.
That's how I knew about it.
Very good. I'm glad you're remembering. Okay, so now, this is not exactly atra because that's a general, just place in general, right? This is atre. What do how that ending, the yud and the hey ending is what?
I am.
A yud and a hey ending in Aramaic,
Yud.
like amar lay instead of in Hebrew you say amar lo, in Aramaic you say amar lay. What's the yud and the hey ending? It's a possessive of him. Like Amar Le means he said to him. Yehei Shmei Rabbo. His name should be great, right? The Yud and the Hey ending in Aramaic is a possessive, usually. His, right? So atre would be what?
His place.
His place. Okay. Ube atre, let's get the whole word now.
In his place.
That's right.
V'hai demasnisim le. That this.
Deha demasni law. Okay, now, Rashi's being a little bit broader here. In whose place are we talking about? In the place deha, of this guy, right? De means of, ha means this, often, right? So Rashi's saying, in the place of this guy, as if there's an imaginary guy, because we said there's some people who learn the Rav Hillel was talking on the Reisha, the Kardum, and some people are learning it, it's going on the Seif, on the Kofitz. So Rashi says, these are specific people, right? Whoever decided to learn, or had the Masorah to learn Rav Hillel on one part or another is a specific person, as it were, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Rashi's saying that guy in his place, right, where he grew up, let's say, where he lived. Which guy are we talking about? Ha de Masni law, the guy who did learn this what? Ha de Rav Hillel, this statement of Rav Hillel, which we're now dealing with. A guy who specifically learned it not on the Reisha but rather on the Seif. So Rashi saying, and where this guy who's learning Rav Hillel as going on the Seifa, in his place where he lives. Now we're finally getting to the end of the sentence. What about that place? Hayu
osim lekofetz zichrut
zachrut
v'nakeva
v'nakvut.
They use the...
No, they make.
Or make. The kofetz with a male and female part of it.
Which if you go back and learn the previous Rashi, you know what Rashi said before? A kofetz has only zachrus.
Yechud.
No. The Gemora said before you can use a kofetz, and we said we would think that's when it's by itself. But Rashi actually said before that is the normal kofetz in their day, to have only one side. But Rashi said this guy who's going to learn Rav Hillel talking about the kofetz, it only works if you happen to have a kofetz that has two sides. Because watch, he's going about to talk about it having two sides. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So it's unlike what we said before, and that's what Rashi's saying. I'm still right what I said before, that the normal kofetz in their day did not have two sides, it only had one, a zachrus. But this person is learning Rav Chinana going on the kofitz, and it's going to be referring to two sides of an implement. It means that he had a kofitz in his place, where he lived. They used to make a kofitz with two sides, right? It's like saying in South Africa they do it that way. Everywhere else in the world they do it one way. South Africa they have to make sure to chop two blacks at one time, so they have two sides of their axes, right?
From X to ground.
Yeah. So that's what Rashi's saying, because otherwise it's not going to make sense, because Rav Chinana is going to be talking about an implement that had two sides. So in this part where he's talking about a kofitz, it must be, right, ipso facto, that he had a kofitz that had two sides. That's what Rashi's saying. I'm just clearing the air. Okay, kamo. Shikorin.
Shikore, something in French.
Bidgoa. A bidgoa. Which is obviously a French word. Okay, so Rashi says, we have such a thing in France. It's called the bidgoa. Right? An axe that has two sides. And those two sides have a zachrus and a nakrus. So before we were talking about a cardam that had two sides, a zachrus and a nakrus, and they said, when it says you can't use the cardam, it means, of course, the nakfus side, not the zachrus side. But now his statement is going to be similar, but it's going to be not on the cardam, it's going to be on the kofitz. So Rashi says, if he's going to make such a statement about the kofitz, we have to postulate that in there, wherever he lived, they did have such a kofitz that had two sides. Then his statement makes sense. Right? What?
Why would it make sense if the kofitz had two sides?
Because he's going to make a statement about two sides of a kofitz. If Rav Chinana makes his statement about the kofitz, right? We're saying this version, he made his statement not on the cardam but on the kofitz.
Yeah.
Well, what is his statement? His statement is to clarify that when you have two sides of an implement, and we're telling you you can use it, we mean only the part that's good, not the part that's no good. Right?
Yeah.
That's what he's trying to explain to you. Rav Chinana's whole chiddush, right? His whole chiddush is that you might have thought that the Mishnah is only talking about a simple implement, but I'm telling you, you have to know how to deal with a complicated implement as well. And the Mishnah actually is referring to even a complicated implement. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if Rav Chinana's chiddush is about a implement that has two sides to it, and he's talking about the kofitz, ipso facto, his kofitz must have had two sides. So Rashi says, I know I told you before that a kofitz has only one side, and I'm still going to stick by what I said. It really is true. In the ancient days, most kofitzes only had one side. But you have to say, this person who happens to be learning Rav Chinana's statement on the kofitz, which means he's making a statement about the kofitz having two sides, must have had in his area, in the place where he lived, a kofitz with two sides. In other words, it's like talking about an imaginary implement that never existed. It's like talking about the unicorn, right? Although I think there's, according to Midrash, there might have been such a thing as a unicorn. Right? But if I say, Sruli, you're allowed to ride a unicorn on Shabbos?
No.
Is there such a thing as a unicorn?
No.
So maybe you're allowed to ride it. If it doesn't exist, you're allowed to ride it.
That's Harry Potter.
In your mind, right? You'll sit in your room and you'll think about it, and you'll be riding it in your mind. So that's the point. Would you say a halacha about something that doesn't exist? So that's what Rashi's bothered by. I told you before that the kofitz only has one side. So how could there be anyone in the world that imagined that Rav Chinana made a statement about a kofitz? He's talking about an implement that has two sides. A kofitz doesn't have two sides. Must be, Rashi says, that whoever's making the statement about Rav Chinana's statement going on a kofitz must have had a kofitz that had two sides. Lo and behold.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Hang in there, 15 minutes.
Sure.
You can finish off the Coke, by the way.
Yeah.
No one's going to blink an eye if you finish off the Coke.
So if it had two sides, why would he allow...
What?
You can finish the whole thing.
No, I don't know if I can drink all of it.
Why not?
It's not in the mood.
What? You don't have to be in the mood. You want to wake up. Aren't you in the mood to wake up?
Yep.
Why would he be happy using a kofitz if it had two sides? It had a male and a female side. The female side you can't use.
But that's what Rav Hillel is trying to tell you.
What do you want to
And
risk?
when the Mishnah says
Yeah.
that you can use a kofitz,
Yeah.
he's going to try to say it's a kofitz that has two sides.
Right.
And the Mishnah is being explicit. You can only use the side that's a kofitz side, not the other side.
Okay.
Now, if he's going to be telling you that, there must have been a kofitz that had two sides in his day and age.
Right.
That's all Rashi's trying to explain. It has to be that this guy lived in a place where they had a kofitz that had two sides.
Shita.
Well, yes, but you see, if you had been Rashi, you would have felt you needed to say that. You know why? Because he said before a kofitz doesn't have two sides. Now you're going to say Rashi's a liar.
Oh, Rashi said that. Where did Rashi say it didn't have two sides?
Okay, now you're challenging me. Let's see. Pshita el b'kofitz tanan. Okay? The kofitz kula zachrusi. A kofitz is only zachrus.
Okay.
There's no nakvus to a kofitz.
Right.
So no one can ever talk about the nakvus side of a kofitz because it doesn't have one. But Rashi said, but look at what happens now. We have an Ika Damasti law that when Rav Hillel made a statement about nakvus and zachrus, he's talking about a kofitz. He's trying to clarify between the two sides of a kofitz. I thought a kofitz doesn't have a nakvus. I told you before it's only zachrus. Rashi says, okay, I meant what I said before. A normal kofitz only has one side, but this guy who's making this new statement, the Ika Damasti law guy, where he has Rav Hillel talking about a kofitz, he must have lived in a place that the kofitz did have two sides. I have to clarify that because I told you before a kofitz doesn't have two sides. So either I'm schizophrenic or I'm a liar or I don't know what.
And sorry, and he said you can use it or you cannot use it?
Who? In the previous part of the Gemora, we had Rav Hillel talking about a kardu.
Right.
And he said you can use the zachrus part of a kardu.
Right.
The Gemora said, Pshita, of course you can use that side. We already told you you can use a kofitz, and Rashi says, and a kofitz is only zachrus.
Right.
Okay. So that was the Gemora saying before, you can use a kofitz and it's only zachrus.
Now he's saying it's not zachrus. It's not.
He's saying it has two sides to it. This new person, Ika Damasno, is going to say, Rav Hillel made a statement about nakvus and zachrus of a kofitz.
So can you still use it?
Yeah, that's what he's going to try to clarify. We haven't seen the Ika Damasno law's exact statement, but Rashi's saying we know he's going to be talking about a nakvus and a zachrus of whatever he's talking about. You say he's talking about a kardam, he was talking about the zachrus and the nakvus of a kardam. If you say he's talking about the kofitz, he was making a statement about the nakvus and the zachrus of a kofitz. But Rashi says, but I told you before that they don't have a nakvus.
Right.
So Rashi saying, I was right before. Most of them in their day did not have it. But this guy, whoever's learning that Rav Hillel made a statement on kofitz, must have lived in a place where they actually did. It was a weird place. It was South Africa. Lived in the jungle. They had to have a two-sided kofitz. Yeah?
You'd be surprised at the decks.
Yeah, I'm still wondering if you can use it though.
Well, he's going to say what he said before. That which it says in the Mishnah, Lo Shanu Ella, they were only telling you one side, not the other. Now, if he's talking about the kofitz, he's talking about the heter. They told you there's a heter with kofitz. Lo Shanu Ella, they were only telling you that regarding one side, not the other. It's the same Rav Hillel, but instead of aiming him at this, you're aiming him at that. You're saying he never made a statement about kardim. He made a statement about kofitz, but he made the same kind of a statement, the Lo Shanu Ella, which means he's trying to clarify what the Mishnah said when it said, in this case, it talked about the heter of kofitz. So when the Mishnah said there was a heter of kofitz, it's only being mat to you the particularly kofitz part of the kofitz, not the nakvus side.
Right.
So now Rashi had a problem that before I even want you to read that, I want you to know I'm covering my bases, because I told you before there is no such thing. Now I'm telling you It's true. Normally there was no such thing, but in their particular place there must have been such an animal.
Which means that it was considered a Kli Uman.
The Nakvus is always the Kli Uman side. That seems to be the way our sugya is going.
Which means you couldn't...
Nakvus was always the Kli Uman side, and Zachrus was the more Pashut side.
What's with Kli Umas and
I think so.
It's a clear cut.
Let's see. There will be more in the Gemora. We've only stopped right before the actual statement of Rav Hina in the Ika Damasni law. And there will be more Rashi on that. So we have definitely more information heading our way. Okay, so he said it on the Kofitz, and now we have the actual statement of Rav Hinana on the Kofitz. Amar Rav Hinana bar Shalmia Mishmei de Rav. Who wants to read the new statement?
Rav Hillel Bar Shamir
Mishmei de Rav.
Hillel Bar Shamir said the name of Rav. Lo Shon.
Where?
Sorry, Amar Rav Hillel. After Seifa.
You see the Seifa word, the beginning of the line says Seifa, Gemora. Yes. I said we're going to see more Rashi, but right now I'm going to go back to the Gemora. Rashi, I just wanted you to see that Rashi did explain that this whole Ika Damasila has a certain way of understanding it. Before we even see what it is, Rashi wanted me to know what's the background.
Okay.
So again, Amar Rav Hina bar Shalmi Amar Mishmei de Rav Lo Shanu
Ela Bezachrus
Shelo. Now what does that mean?
Are you talking about the shorter
Yeah, but you have to fill in the details. The Mishnah only learned that you can use a kofitz, because he's going on the kofitz. That means he's going the heter of kofitz. It only taught me that you can use a kofitz.
What about the shorter side?
On the Zacharus side, correct.
Aval, the Nakvus Shaloi, with the bigger side of the Kofetz, so.
Right. So and bigger or smaller might be true as well, but more important for us is the non-professional and professional side. Okay, so even as Rashi said, in their particular place there was a kofitz that had two sides, one maybe longer, one shorter, but more importantly, one was professional side and one was less professional. So even the kofitz, they're only telling you can use the non-professional side, which probably is the shorter side, as we said before. But the Gemora says, like it said before, on the statement of Hina, again, we have the same claim as before.
Shita, it's obvious.
It's obvious that is true, that I would not be allowed to use the Nakvu side of a kofitz. Why? How would I know that for sure? Says the Gemora in its Kasha. Tanan. Meaning I already have a part of the Mishnah telling me you can't use a kardum. So if the kofitz has a side which is like a kardum, like you said, a longer side, a more professional side, then of course I can't use it, because I've already been told I can't use a kardum. So why did Rav Hina have to tell me that? Right? So it's exactly like the first version, except instead of making all of our statements about the kardum, we're making it about the kofitz. So now the Gemara says, just one second. Should we see the Rashi on that Pshita? Or should we first see the end of the Gemara and then go back and do the Pshita and the answer?
It's okay if I wait till after the shir to bench, we can stop to 5 o'clock.
Yes.
Okay, good.
You can even borrow the key again if you want.
No, just to bench.
Have some more bread.
Excuse me?
Have some more bread. Have some more bread.
Why would you need more bread?
Because he's running out of time, huh?
When did you last eat bread?
I finish around 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock?
Yeah.
So you should probably eat a bit more. And if you want to, but you can bench right now if you want to. If you want to eat bread, you can eat more bread. If you don't want to eat more bread, then just bench now before the 72 minutes runs out. You place at 5 o'clock. You want to turn off the camera? I'll step out for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a Rashi on the Pshita. Should we do that first or finish the Gemora and go back?
Let's finish the Gemora.
Okay, so Gemora is saying, we already know
From a cardom.
that you can't use the cardum side of a kofitz because it says you can't use a cardum. It says that earlier. So the Gemara says another mahu desema to explain. No. Who's reading the mahu desema?
Me.
Mahu desema, anamili cardom, aval, is this the one?
Yeah.
Aval kofitz, a cardom.
Okay, so what's it saying? Let's just get it straight before we get on. Mahu desema means what?
What would you have thought?
Without Rav Hillel, you might have made a mistake.
Right.
You might have said what? Hani mili.
These words.
Meaning what? The kardum part of the Mishnah
Right.
that said you can't use a kardum. I might have thought that's only what? Specifically kardum.
But it's not, it's a kofitz.
No, no, no.
Mhm.
This is part of what I might have thought.
Yeah.
Don't jump the gun.
Okay.
I might have thought that if it's a kardum, I can't use it. But if it's a kardum plus a kofitz,
Oh, I see. Kofitz. The cardom.
it's still part of what I might have said. Ema, I might say,
Migoi, since the he.
Dehai, Gisa.
Shari. So since the broad side, since
No.
the side is allowed, permitted,
which would be the shorter side.
yeah.
Since on such a case, I know the shorter side is mutter. Sorry, I might have thought that even the other side as well,
Is it
even the broader side,
is
the kardum side might also be mutter. Then I needed Rav Hillel to say Kamash Malan to come teach us that not.
It's not like this.
That it's specifically the side that we permitted you, and the side that we didn't permit you, remains us. Even if it's part of an implement that has a partial heter. Again, I think this makes more sense if we think of it in terms of the maris ayin. Because again, if I see you holding an implement that has two sides, then maybe I'm always going to assume you did the right thing. Maybe that's how we have to always. So I'm allowed to use the other side even, because people will think I'm using the right side, right? Maybe people always judge me favorably. When they see me holding such an implement, they'll think I'm using the right side and not the wrong side. So I'm even allowed to use the wrong side. Because of course, I'm not using it for isser, I'm using it for chopping wood, which is mutter. So maybe I'd be allowed to use even the broader side for chopping the wood, because then when people see me, they'll think I'm using the shorter side. They won't necessarily think I'm using the wrong side. Therefore, they will never make this assumption that I'm doing malacha with the other side. But Kamash Malan, no. Chazal are very specific, and they only allow you the specific thing that was spoken about. Even if it's part of a double implement, you can't cop around. You can't make it. Okay, maybe we'll start on Sunday with this.